Hello everyone, I'm Alex, and today I bring you a story that will challenge the way you see success, family, and self-worth. Imagine spending your whole life chasing approval from the people who should love you unconditionally, only to realize that they never believed in you at all. That's exactly what happened to Emma Caldwell, a woman who dared to dream beyond the limits her own family set for her. When Emma opened Aurora, a restaurant that would soon take Washington, D.C. by storm, she thought it would be the moment her parents and sister would finally see her worth. But instead, she was met with silence, until they needed her success for themselves. This is not just a story about food. It's a story about resilience, betrayal, and the realization that family isn't always the people you're born to, it's the people who show up. Stay with me, because this one is unforgettable. On a warm spring evening, Emma Caldwell stood by the large window of Aurora, the upscale restaurant she had spent years building in the historic district of Georgetown, Washington, D.C. She watched as the golden sunset bathed the red brick streets, where history and modernity intertwined. Tomorrow, Aurora would officially open its doors, marking a turning point in her life. Aurora was more than just a restaurant. It was the realization of a dream Emma had nurtured since she was 14, standing in her grandmother's kitchen, learning how to make traditional lasagna. The restaurant's name was inspired by the nights Emma and her grandmother spent by the warm stove, watching the northern lights through the small window. For Emma, Aurora represented the light of perseverance, the belief that hard work could create something extraordinary. Unlike her grandmother, who had always encouraged her, Emma's family never believed in her. Her father, Harold Caldwell, a former hedge fund manager, saw finance as the only respectable path to success. Her mother, Lorraine, once a passionate activist, had become absorbed in the luxurious expectations of Washington's elite. And then there was Ellie Caldwell, Emma's younger sister, a rising star in the real estate world, regularly featured in financial magazines for closing multi-million-dollar deals. 4 years ago, Emma had walked away from a stable job at a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York to chase her dream of opening her own place. She invested every dollar she had and took out a hefty bank loan to transform an aging building into Aurora. The journey had been anything but easy. Between financial struggles, long nights, and her family's dismissive attitude, she had faced countless obstacles, none more painful than Ellie's mockery. She could still hear the conversation from 3 months ago, the night she announced Aurora's grand opening to her family. The setting was an exclusive private dining room at one of DC's most expensive restaurants. As soon as Emma started talking, her father cut her off. "A restaurant? You're still wasting time on that." Harold placed his wine glass down, disappointment etched in his face. "Dad, this isn't just a restaurant. This is my life's work." Emma kept her voice steady. Ellie chuckled, swirling her cocktail. "Do you have any idea how expensive Georgetown real estate is? If you were so eager to burn money, you should have given it to me, I'd at least make you a profit." Their mother barely looked up from her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly, as if Emma's words were insignificant. At that moment, it became painfully clear, her family didn't believe in her, not even a little. To them, her passion was just a phase, an indulgence. But instead of discouraging her, their words fueled her determination. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Emma had assembled a dream team: Daniel, a head chef trained in Paris, Sophia, a pastry expert from Le Cordon Bleu, and Marcus, a seasoned sommelier with a refined palate. She spent weeks perfecting the menu, testing every dish, and sourcing only the freshest ingredients from local farms. The night before the grand opening, Emma sat alone in the restaurant, a glass of red wine in hand. The cream-colored tablecloths lay perfectly smooth, the chandeliers cast a warm glow, and the polished silverware gleamed under the dim lights. It was exactly how she had imagined it. She checked her phone, hoping for a message, an RSVP, a sign that her family would show up. Nothing. Not a single message. She exhaled slowly, pushing away the disappointment. "They'll come," she whispered, as if saying it aloud would make it true. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, and the Potomac River shimmered beneath the moonlight. Tomorrow, everything would begin, whether her family was there or not, she would step forward, ready to make her mark. The restaurant was nearly finished. The polished brass chandeliers cast a soft glow over the marble countertops, the scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, and the final touches on the Aurora sign outside gleamed under the city lights. Everything was falling into place, except for the one thing Emma tried to ignore. Her family. No calls. No texts. No acknowledgement of the invitations she had sent 2 weeks ago. She had told herself that it didn't matter. That their approval wasn't necessary. But deep down, a small part of her had hoped. A hope that had been crushed 3 months ago. It had been a cold evening in December, the kind where the air was sharp and unforgiving. The Caldwell family had gathered at the Rutherford, one of the most exclusive steakhouses in Washington, D.C., a place that, as her father Harold often reminded them, was reserved for serious people doing serious business. Emma sat at the table, trying to find the right moment to speak. Ellie, her younger sister, was effortlessly holding the room, boasting about yet another multi-million-dollar real estate deal. So, I finally closed the Riverside estate. Commission was just over $200,000, she said with an exaggerated sigh, as if the number bored her. And next month, I'm handling a waterfront mansion in the Hamptons. You wouldn't believe how much money these people are willing to spend. Harold, her father, smiled proudly. That's my girl. You're building real wealth, securing a future. That's what matters. Emma swallowed hard and sat up straighter. This was it. Her turn. I actually have some news too, she said, keeping her voice steady. I'm opening my own restaurant. It's called Aurora. Silence. Her mother, Lorraine, barely looked up from her phone. Ellie's smirk widened. Harold simply took a slow sip of his whiskey. A restaurant, he said finally, his voice carrying the same disappointment she had heard her entire life. Emma, you're throwing away your time and money. Restaurants fail. It's a fact. Emma felt a slow burn rising in her chest. Not all of them. 90% do, Harold countered. And the other 10%? They barely scrape by. You want to waste your life, creating experiences for people who won't remember your name the next day? Ellie let out a laugh. You should have asked me before you signed the lease. I could have told you it was a terrible investment. Emma clenched her jaw. I don't need your advice, Ellie. Oh, come on, Ellie said, still grinning. When it all falls apart, let me know. I might be able to get you a decent price on the building. Her mother finally chimed in, her tone light but dismissive. Emma, sweetie, wouldn't it be easier to do catering? That way, you wouldn't have to, what's the word, publicly fail. Emma blinked, as if the words had physically struck her. Publicly fail. She stared at them. The people who were supposed to believe in her. Support her. And yet, here they were, mocking something she had spent her entire life working toward. Her hands clenched under the table. This was it. This was the moment she realized they were never going to change. Slowly, she stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I get it now, she said, voice steady despite the ache in her chest. No matter what I do, it'll never be enough for this family. Ellie sighed dramatically. Oh, come on, Emma. Don't be so sensitive. Harold didn't even look at her. You're making a mistake. And when it falls apart, don't expect us to clean it up. Emma exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Don't worry. I wouldn't take a single dime from any of you. And with that, she walked away. She didn't wait for them to call after her, because she knew they wouldn't. She stepped out into the cold night air, her breath visible in the freezing wind. The city around her was alive with people moving toward their next destinations, toward things that mattered to them. And at that moment, Emma realized, her family had never been her destination. They had been the obstacle. Now, standing in the sleek, gleaming kitchen of Aurora, Emma checked her phone once more. Still nothing. Sophia, her pastry chef, peeked in. "You okay?" Emma set her phone down and forced a small smile. "Yeah. I'm fine." Sophia crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Look, if they don't show up, that's on them. But we will. We show up." Emma let out a quiet laugh. She had built this. With or without them, Aurora would open. And it would thrive. She picked up her chef's knife, turning toward the lasagna dish she had spent weeks perfecting, the same one her grandmother used to make, the one that had started this dream in the first place. Her hands were steady. She didn't need their approval. She never had. Tomorrow, the world would see what she was capable of. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The morning of Aurora's grand opening arrived with a crisp spring breeze sweeping through the historic streets of Georgetown. The sun cast golden hues over the red brick buildings, and the scent of fresh flowers from the nearby market carried on the air. Inside the restaurant, the kitchen was alive with the rhythmic sounds of chopping, sizzling, and the steady hum of anticipation. Emma, dressed in her pristine white chef's coat, stood at the center of it all, overseeing the final preparations. Sophia was piping delicate swirls of lemon mousse onto tarts, while Daniel was double-checking the seafood delivery. The restaurant's tables, draped in crisp linen, sparkled under the warm glow of hand-blown chandeliers. Everything was in place. Everything, except the people she had once called family. Emma reached for her phone, her heart tightening as she unlocked the screen. No calls. No messages. Not even a generic "good luck." She had told herself she wouldn't care. That their absence wouldn't define this night. But the silence from her parents and sister felt louder than a full dining room of critics and VIPs. She tucked the phone into her pocket, inhaling deeply. She would not let them take this moment from her. By 6 p.m., the first guests arrived. The scent of truffle butter and freshly baked sourdough drifted through the air as the elite of Washington, D.C. stepped through Aurora's grand doors. Michelle Parker, the legendary food critic from the Washington Post, was among them, her emerald dress shimmering under the restaurant's dim glow. Not far behind her was Jonathan Sterling, New York's most feared and respected food journalist. Emma moved through the space with quiet authority, greeting guests with a polished smile. But every time the door swung open, a flicker of hope surfaced, only to be extinguished just as quickly. Her father wasn't coming. Her mother wasn't coming. Ellie wasn't coming. By the time the amuse-bouche was served, a delicate lobster medallion drizzled with saffron-infused butter, murmurs of approval filled the restaurant. But Emma barely heard them. Then came the moment she had waited for. The signature dish, her grandmother's handmade lasagna, reimagined with house-made ricotta, basil-infused tomato sauce, and layers of slow-cooked short rib ragu. Plates were placed before the guests with an elegant flourish. Michelle Parker took the first bite. Silence. A slow, deliberate pause. And then, a small, knowing smile. Emma held her breath. "This isn't just food," Michelle said softly, setting down her fork. "This is storytelling on a plate." The words hit Emma like a wave, washing away months, years, of doubt. She barely had time to process it when Jonathan Sterling, at table 7, gestured toward her. Emma smoothed her chef's coat and approached. "Mr. Sterling, I hope you're enjoying your meal." He studied her for a moment before nodding toward his half-finished dish. "This reminds me of my childhood. But somehow, it's more." Emma's throat tightened. More. More than just a meal. More than just a restaurant. More than she had ever been given credit for. He set down his napkin and leaned back, an approving gleam in his eye. "This is the best thing I've eaten in years." The noise of the restaurant faded for a moment. The world seemed to stand still. Emma had won. But then her phone vibrated. Her pulse quickened. For a second, a single, foolish second, she thought maybe. She pulled it out, her hands almost trembling. Ellie's name flashed on the screen. Emma's breath caught as she answered. Ellie. A laugh, sharp, cold, dismissive. Oh, was that today? Ellie's voice was dripping with mockery. I would have stopped by, but I'm at a fundraiser in the Hamptons. You know, where the real business happens. Emma felt something inside her crack, but not in the way she expected. She didn't feel hurt. She felt done. For so long, she had wanted their approval. But what was there to want? She wasn't the one missing out. They were. She ended the call without another word. And when she looked up, her staff was watching her. Sophia. Daniel. Tom. The people who had stood by her. People who had shown up. Emma took a steady breath and straightened her shoulders. Let's get the next course out. The evening continued, with champagne toasts and waves of applause as guests raved about the meal. Reservations were already flooding in before the night had even ended. By midnight, as the last VIPs departed, Michelle Parker stopped at the doorway. I'll be writing about Aurora this week, she told Emma. Expect a full house for months. Emma smiled. Thank you, Ms. Parker. That means everything. Michelle tilted her head. No. Thank you, Chef Caldwell. And just like that, she was gone. The room fell quiet. Emma turned toward her staff, all of them watching her with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Sophia broke the silence first. Emma, you did it. Tom grinned. No. We did it. Emma glanced around at the restaurant, at the people who had stood by her, and realized, he was right. She picked up the recipe book her grandmother had given her and held it close. Her family had failed her. But she had built something better. Aurora wasn't just a restaurant. It was home. The transformation of Aurora from a promising restaurant to the most exclusive dining experience in Washington, D.C. happened almost overnight. 2 weeks after the grand opening, Michelle Parker's review in the Washington Post set the city on fire. A restaurant that doesn't just serve food, it tells a story. Aurora is not only the best new restaurant in D.C., it may very well be the best in the country. Shortly after, Jonathan Sterling's feature in the New York Times labeled Emma Caldwell as the next great culinary visionary of our time. The result? A 6-month waitlist. Every evening, the restaurant hummed with Washington's elite, senators, Hollywood executives, tech billionaires, all desperate to experience the magic of Aurora. Emma found herself serving the very kind of people her father had once deemed serious professionals. And yet, her family remained silent. They had mocked her dreams. Now, they were nowhere to be found. Until their world started falling apart. Emma was in the middle of plating a dish when Tom, her sous chef, appeared at her side, phone in hand. Emma, you're going to want to see this. He turned the screen toward her. Ellie Caldwell's real estate firm faces major client exodus. Emma frowned, taking the phone. The article from DC Business Review detailed how Ellie's most valuable clients were withdrawing their offers on multimillion-dollar properties. The reason? They couldn't get reservations at Aurora. Emma blinked. Was this real? She kept reading. For Washington's elite, securing a table at Aurora has become the new mark of exclusivity. Without access to the restaurant, high-end homebuyers are reconsidering their investments, leading to an unexpected ripple effect in the luxury real estate market. A slow smile tugged at her lips. The irony was delicious. That night, her phone rang. She saw the name. Ellie. For a brief moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the best of her. She answered. Ellie. Silence. Then, a clipped exhale. I need a table at Aurora. This week. And I need you to make it happen. Emma's grip on the phone tightened. There it was. The moment she had been waiting for. She leaned against the counter. Why? Ellie exhaled sharply. Because my clients expect VIP treatment, and if I can't get them into Aurora, they're pulling out of their deals. My firm is bleeding money. Emma let the silence stretch. You mean the same restaurant you laughed at, she said slowly. Ellie groaned. God, Emma, can you stop being so sensitive? That was months ago. Emma raised an eyebrow. You mean when you said my restaurant was a terrible investment? Or when you told me to call you when it failed? Ellie's voice sharpened. This isn't personal. It's business. You owe me for this. Emma let out a short laugh. I owe you. Ellie huffed. Do you have any idea how much I've done for you? Something inside Emma snapped. Done for me? Her voice was low, controlled. You spent years tearing me down. You humiliated me in front of our parents. You made sure I knew I would never be as successful as you. And now, you want a favor. A long silence. Then Ellie's voice turned cold. Fine. Have it your way. But don't come crying to me when this all falls apart. Emma didn't flinch. Goodbye, Ellie. She hung up. And for the first time, she felt completely free. The next evening, as Emma was reviewing the menu, Sophia appeared at the doorway, looking hesitant. Your parents just called the front desk. Emma already knew what was coming. Sophia folded her arms. They asked for a reservation. The earliest table is 6 months from now, but they're asking to see you. Emma exhaled slowly, the weight of their absence pressing down on her. For years, she had dreamed of a moment like this, where they would finally recognize her success. But now, she knew exactly why they were calling. She wasn't their daughter in this moment. She was an opportunity. She straightened her shoulders. Tell them the policy applies to everyone. Sophia grinned. With pleasure. That night, as Aurora bustled with laughter and clinking glasses, Emma stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The air was cool, the streetlights casting a soft glow. Somewhere across the city, her parents were staring at their phones, realizing they had no access to their own daughter's success. Emma pulled out her phone. A new text from her mother. Emma, we should talk. Emma smiled. No, they should have listened. She slipped her phone into her pocket and turned back toward Aurora. The only family she needed was waiting inside. Aurora had long since stopped being just a restaurant. It was now a phenomenon, a place where the most powerful people in Washington fought for a seat at the table. 6 months had passed since the grand opening, and still, the waitlist stretched beyond a year. Food critics, Hollywood celebrities, and billionaires had walked through the doors, yet one thing remained unchanged: Emma's family had never once been part of it. Until tonight. Emma was plating the final course of the evening when Sophia appeared at her side, eyes wide. Emma, you might want to come out front. Emma wiped her hands on a towel and followed her to the entrance of the restaurant. And there they were. Harold and Lorraine Caldwell, standing stiffly at the host stand. They weren't alone. They were accompanied by 4 other people, clearly business associates. Lorraine was speaking to the hostess with an air of practiced charm. Good evening, we have a reservation under Caldwell. The hostess, well trained for situations like these, checked the book with a neutral expression. I'm sorry, but I don't see that name listed. Lorraine let out a small, polite laugh, feigning confusion. Oh, there must be some mistake. My daughter is the chef here, Emma Caldwell. Sophia muttered under her breath. Oh, this is going to be good. Emma didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched. The hostess kept her tone professional. Chef Caldwell has a strict reservation policy. The next available table is in 12 months. Would you like me to add your name to the wait list? Silence. Harold's face darkened. You must be joking. The hostess remained unbothered. I assure you, sir, I am not. Lorraine turned, scanning the restaurant, looking for Emma. Then, Harold finally saw her. Emma met his eyes through the glass. And she saw it. For the first time in her life, she saw fear in her father's expression. It wasn't fear of her. It was fear of irrelevance. Harold Caldwell had built his life on power, influence, and control, and at this moment, he had none. Emma didn't move. Didn't wave. Didn't acknowledge them. And then, she turned and walked away. Back in the kitchen, Emma exhaled, pressing her hands against the counter. Sophia grinned. That was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. Emma let out a small laugh. You saw that? Sophia crossed her arms. Oh, we all did. Tom leaned against the counter. So, that was them. Emma nodded. Sophia smirked. And you just walked away. Damn, that's cold. Emma let that sit for a moment. She had always assumed that moment would feel like revenge. That finally being in control, finally having the upper hand, would feel like winning. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about realizing that she had already won. They had spent years tearing her down, waiting for her to fail, expecting her to crawl back, begging for their approval. And instead, they had shown up at her door, desperate for access. And she had walked away. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because she simply didn't need them anymore. That night, as the last guests left and the restaurant settled into its final moments of peace, Emma sat at the bar with her team. Sophia poured a glass of wine and slid it to her. To Aurora. Tom raised his glass. To proving them all wrong. Emma paused. Then, shaking her head, she lifted her glass. To the family that actually shows up. Their glasses clinked, the sound ringing through the empty restaurant. And that, not reviews, not Michelin stars, not recognition from people who had doubted her, was the greatest success of all. As she stepped outside later that night, Emma pulled out her phone. A new text from her mother. Emma, we should talk. Emma smiled. No. They should have listened. She put her phone away and walked back inside. The only family she needed was waiting for her. One evening, as Aurora hummed with quiet energy, Emma sat in her office, flipping through the next season's menu. The restaurant had become more than a success, it was a legacy in the making. She had built something that would outlast her. That was when Sophia walked in, holding a letter. It's from your mother. Emma hesitated before taking it. The envelope was crisp, the handwriting familiar. A part of her already knew what it would say. She unfolded the letter carefully, her eyes scanning the words. Dear Emma. I watched your interview today. They called you a culinary genius. I suppose I should have known that's what you would become. I should have told you that when you were younger. I don't expect you to forgive us. But I do hope, someday, we can sit down for a meal together. Love. Mom. Emma traced the ink with her fingertips, her heart strangely calm. There was no anger. No pain. Just acceptance. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not as a rejection, but as a reminder. She didn't need their approval anymore. She never had. That weekend, Emma stood before a packed lecture hall at Harvard Business School. She had been invited to speak on the power of vision, resilience, and building something that matters. As she looked across the eager faces, a student raised their hand. Chef Caldwell, do you think family relationships are important in business? The room fell silent. Emma smiled. I think family is about who stands by you. And sometimes, the people who share your blood aren't the ones who show up. Applause. Loud. Powerful. She had walked away from the people who never believed in her. And yet, she had never been alone. That night, back at Aurora, Emma stepped into the kitchen, watching her team move with precision and passion. This was her real family. The people who had stood by her when no one else had. She wasn't the girl waiting for approval anymore. She was the woman who had built something extraordinary. And for the first time in her life, she knew, she was finally free. A story of strength, independence, and the family we choose. Emma Caldwell's journey is more than just a tale of success, it's a testament to self-worth, resilience, and breaking free from the need for validation. For years, she sought approval from a family that never believed in her. They dismissed her dreams, mocked her ambition, and only returned when they needed something from her success. But Emma didn't let their rejection define her. Instead, she built her own path, surrounded by people who truly valued her. This story is a reminder that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. And sometimes, walking away from those who never supported you is the most powerful choice you can make. Emma didn't need their approval. She needed her own. And when she finally realized that, she was free. Blue heart, if this story moved you, like this video to show your support. Speech balloon comment 1. If you believe love is stronger than blood. Loudspeaker, share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Bell, subscribe for more gripping, real-life stories that touch the heart. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong and believe in second chances.